So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we have another siege. According to the message that sent this to me, it was supposed to be on Dale, I think, although I think the player that sent it to me just got confused about what the maps were called, because this is MIRLOND. But I'm okay with that, because MIRLOND is still a rather interesting map. It has the, well, it is a siege, but it takes place mostly within the city itself. There is also the potential for a bit of skirmishing happening on the open ground outside of it, and it always has the nice theme of it being sort of a naval invasion from the sea over there, albeit the actual coastline has never factored into any of the battles that I have foreseen, or I have seen anyway. But it's also a map that I'm actually quite glad to cover because it is a triumvirate of elven factions that are on the defence in Imladris and Mirkwood and Lothlorien as well, so a very strong combination. Not much in the way of numbers between the three of them combined, especially against a force of 5 armies arrayed against them, but you have to say that in terms of sheer quality they should have everything they need to put up a very stout defence. But let's go rather quickly through the army compositions, because the number of frames does make me a little bit nervous that there's going to be a large cut to be had, or the attackers won't be as aggressive as I'm hoping they will be. We have MP Beckamy 13 playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. Always good to have on the attack, to be honest with you, because of the sheer numbers they can bring. And with the Blackback Mountain Berserkers, who is the General's bodyguard, which is an interesting choice because it means that they cannot make use of their hiding mechanic, albeit that's going to be less important in this battle. You'd have to use it more to sort of guard against archers shooting them when they're in the city itself, more than actually ambushing. But still, very, very damaging. One of the units in the Misty Mountains roster that can deal reliable damage to all of the elven units they will be facing. Goblin King's bodyguard, on the other hand, are a much more defensive unit. You see the General's bodyguard, you see the General put into this bodyguard unit more often as a result. They're still good, obviously they're not as good as the equivalent elven units by any means, far from it, but they're still much tankier than most of the other forces the Misty Mountains have. Cave Troll Drummers, very important, 2 units of them actually, I believe, yes indeed. So he's got a huge amount of morale boosting capabilities, but it is worth saying these Cave Troll Drummers will only boost the morale of his army. So if he was hoping to sort of act as like this morale battery for all of his team, it won't work, unfortunately for him. We've got a lot of heavy goblin halberds, which of course as a phalanx are all well and good. And it is worth saying as well that the amount of phalanx units the elves can generally bring, because Linden are the ones that are not here, will be quite limited. The ones they can bring are obviously extremely good, with the Imladris Guardians and of course the Cardolan's Guardians as well. But there's not many of them, so you could actually get some really good value off of halberd units like this, as cheap as they may be and as fragile as they could be, depending on the engagement. Heavy goblin spears, armour piercing of course, will be useful, more so against Imladris, less so against Mirkwood, but still they're better than the heavy goblin infantry anyway for not that much more money, so definitely worthwhile bringing them. White Uruk Fearmongers, heavy goblin crossbow, so more AP, a lot of hidden units which I imagine consists mostly of like goblin units, which can be used as sort of numbers fodder, and some heavy goblin infantry as well, just to round things off. The second army, we have a little bit more quality in Y2K and Rhun. So he has got some upgraded Variag mercenaries. I very much approve of this because it means you can skirmish. They won't win in an outright skirmish, especially not against the 2 Sylvan Elf factions, but they can absorb a lot of punishment, and that will of course impact the elves' abilities later on to use their archers where they really want to. Baltroth tribesmen as well, obviously javelins. Cheaper javelins like this, I mean they're not as cheap as stuff like orc javelins, but they still will be very useful if they can get into a good position for equalising the fight in their favour a little bit more. Some Cummels, Chosen and some Loci on Rim, so there's tankier units of infantry here for Rhun, backed up by yet more halberds, which of course the Gamprin will be even better than the heavy goblin halberds, and the same thing applies if they can avoid the more limited phalanx options of the elves. They could be really efficient. Eastron Clansmen are here also with the full upgrades. It makes them look very impressive, and to be fair, for a militia unit they are, but do bear in mind they will still get absolutely dumpstered by higher tier elven units. Flagrim, again, armour piercing will be handy, but again, your mileage will definitely vary with units like this when you're facing elves of this magnitude. And a couple of, I think actually just 1 unit of Eastron crossbows with the upgrade. It'll make them a little bit more resilient against elven arrow fire, but to be honest, if a higher tier elven archer gets trained in on them, the armour upgrade will not save them and the Eastron crossbows will still fall. He's also got the Dragon's Breath, which is not as popular now that it's not horrendously overpowered. It's actually a little bit unreliable now, if anything. But the crew themselves are one of the examples of a sort of new philosophy that's come in lately, of having some artillery crews be like really strong, and they are. They're effectively a bodyguard tier infantry unit once the ammunition is depleted, so it's still well worth bringing, albeit it's very expensive, and the artillery itself can be quite difficult to use, especially in varied terrain like this. Then we have Mordor, played by Tupac Aquatic. He has got some Mirlond infantry, very basic stuff, but numbers are very important in this sort of battle. You're never going to out-quality the elves, so it definitely pays to invest more in some numbers. Minismorgul chosen for a more sort of heavy-duty unit. Orc Maulers for a bit of cheap AP, which again will be useful, but again, mileage will vary. Orc Archers, I like the inclusion of cheap archers in this sort of situation as long as they are used correctly. And then back here we have some Temple Executioners. He's gone a little bit too heavy on cavalry, I think, for this map, but they could still be useful if they go around the edge of the map, potentially, to flank around. Adonai Lancers, Melkor's Chosen, and Temple Inquisitors. So a lot of melee cavalry, so it will prevent a sally out, I suppose. Uruk Captains, they're an armor-piercing bodyguard, which obviously, again, will be very useful, especially on a bodyguard unit. Temple Guard, and Olag High. So, to be fair, this is still quite a quality-focused Mordor army, which a lot of people do. I honestly prefer to play Mordor with more numbers. I think if you, especially in an offensive siege like this, you just open yourselves up to being focused down if you play this way, which is okay if, like, not every attacking army does it. And it'll be interesting to see if that is going to be the case. We have Farkin, who's playing as Cardolan. Unfortunate that someone had to break the theme, but there's always one. There's always one in a game full of randoms. Where you get someone who just insists on making it so that you can't really count it as a fully thematic battle, and that's this man this time around. But he's got some Tharbad Warhammers, he's got a lot of Mid-Heriath. The morale could be a real issue when they're going up against the sheer quality that the elves can bring to bear, but as we've seen with Cardolan in the past, their crossbows are really, really effective, and also stuff like the Wards of Tir Gorthad are not half bad either. He's gone for not a lot of, again, not Greenway units, not a huge amount of numbers. I mean, he's gone for a lot of Mid-Heriath, but to be fair, he's spent more money on his army. Like, the cheap pikes are so useful a lot of the time, so it's a little bit surprising not to see them, to be honest with you. And finally, we have Numenor. A little bit more understandable that the Black Numenorians are in tow with the Orcs and the Easterlings, with Valkyrion playing as them. He's got some Seafarers, really high damage javelins, Numenorian steel bows, who can also be very useful. Few units of Numenorian cohort. I mean, to be fair, of all the factions on display today, the Numenorian faction here is going to be the one that can most easily go toe-to-toe with the elves in terms of quality. Mordor's higher tiers can do it, of course, but they're in far shorter supply than Numenor's main line army. Shield Guard are here as well. Belagire Pikemen, we've got some Naru Sentinels, a really good unit of Pike, so nice to see some Phalanx units. I approve more of Numenor going quality heavy because they don't have much more of a choice, but I think Mordor perhaps should have gone more numbers heavy, and I'm surprised to see no Greenway units from presumably conquered Cardolan. Pharazim Swordmasters are here, Royal Legion of Armenlos also. I wonder if there's a city that I could use that's a bit more geographically suitable for this, because there's no way the elves would have taken Mirlond, and there's no way Cardolan would have come across. It's a very bizarre set of circumstances. We shall see. I wonder if there's a place in Eriador that I can find. We have, however, playing as the first Elven defender, Frodo Synthesis, who's playing as Lorien, a name that I know all too well from my Divide and Conquer campaign. Woodland Protectors, obviously nice to have some javelins. March Wardens of the Wood with their poison arrows, again, really useful potentially against the Misty Mountains and Cardolan especially. Keren Amroth Rangers are hidden in there as well, which can brutalise anyone when they're on the attack, doesn't matter who you are. Heavy Lorenand Archers as well, probably the best choice for skirmishing if needs be, because even if they waste most of their ammo, they're still an effective infantry unit at the end of the day. We've got some Watchers of the Goldenwood with their Silverthorns, really good at breaking up a formation, hard to advance through them, and they can interrupt a unit that's firing on them. So they are actually good at skirmishing with enemies, but you have to sort of weigh up the value proposition of that. There's the armour upgraded Kindred of Caliborn, who I really like the armour upgrade on them. It really just makes them much sharper and higher quality. Split shots as well, of course, not quite as devastating as Rangers are, but still something to watch out for. Blades of the Wood to just bulk out the army a little bit. I approve of this because most of the low tier stuff they'll be going up against they will still beat, and they, their melee defense is still good enough to make them give even slightly stronger units a problem, or at least a speed bump. Armour is their main issue. Lorenand Spears are here, as well as Lorenand Swordmasters. Interesting to see the heavy spears and the Swordmasters. Strange actually to not see the Axemen brought and instead the heavy swordsmen brought. I think the axes with the AP actually, seeing as you're the only Elven faction that can do it, there is kind of an expectation, I think, that you sort of engage in that sort of thing, especially against Numenor and Mordor and the like. So it's a little bit surprising that he hasn't gone for that. But he has gone for 2 units of Karas Galadhon's Guardians, so he has gone into the red limit. Obviously that is very expensive, but it's also very worthwhile. It does sort of take away from the potential weakness I was talking about before, especially from Lothlorien's perspective anyway, where they can definitely just hold at least one choke point fairly indefinitely with them, as long as they don't get hit by javelins. Then the player who sent me this battle replay, I think this one was sent to me twice actually now that I think about it, but we're going to be seeing it from Drew Shiotis's, or Shiotis's? Dro Shiotis. I'm just going to call him Dro for the rest of the battle, I think. But he's playing as Mirkwood, ever the fan favourite. Wardens of Amon Lanka in there with the Elders of the Elven King, again more Silverthorns. We have got some upgraded Hiri Peng, so it'll make them better at skirmishing with the enemy. It brings them more into line armour-wise with the heavier Lorenand archers, whilst being sort of Mirkwoody in nature. I think they've got better melee defense slightly, but obviously for an archer that's a little bit questionable as to how much value that actually gives you, but with the armour upgrade it makes them pretty much the same anyway. Woodland Realm Patrol, so a lot of archers as you'd expect from Mirkwood. Woodland Protectors, again, probably the fan favourite infantry unit in the game, to be honest with you, is the Elven King's Palace Guard. I think from now until the end of time people will be asking me how strong they are relative to everything else. They're strong. Armour piercing, anti-cavalry, very useful stuff. We also have some upgraded Hiri Lung, so he's gone for the heavier units, which in a defensive situation like this, very understandable. Upgraded Hiri Alth, he's got some Woodland Realm Axemen to bulk out the line and give a little bit of damage with those axes. You can also hold the line with the Spears of Amenduir, but especially with the upgraded Hiri Ek. And then finally, if the Palace Guard are a fan favourite unit, then Imladris here are the fan favourite faction. We have Lord of the Fallen, who has got some Eldarenway archers, he's got some Gwaith Mirdain as well as the God Helim in there, the Imladris Silverthorn Arrow Archer. Eldarenway archers, Swords of Rivendell with the upgrade, he's gone for some Bruinen River Wards, heavy swordsmen, obviously really good. Imladris Sentries, glad to see them, so good at holding a position, I think there's 2 of them in there as well, so he's invested in his pikes too. Imladris Guardians, probably the best heavy sword and board line infantry unit that you can mass up in the game. It's because of the numbers you can bring them in, that is a debate that can be had, because obviously bodyguard units are going to be stronger, but you can't mass them up to the same extent as the Imladris Guardians. You can't form a front line of only bodyguards. Eldarenway Spears, the extremely tanky Gwaith Arthand, the Eldarenway Swordmasters, and more Swords of Rivendell. There is also an artillery piece, I believe. Indeed, there is a ballista back here. So they have everything they need to put up a brutal defence here, the elves, but will their lower numbers ultimately get the better of them as 5 armies surround them? We shall see. I think there's some questionable compositions for the attackers, like I said, but is that going to be enough to scupper their chances? The attackers in a 5v3 always have a certain advantage after all. But we'll see. We'll make a cut, obviously, because there's bound to be a lengthy marching phase. Actually, is there one unit just out here? There is something out here, I think. Could be Watchers of the Goldenwood hidden in the trees, perhaps. Regardless, I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin when the attackers are finally attacking the elven lines. So I'm going to rejoin the battle here. There has been a little bit that's happened up until this point, but I've got to be honest with you, most of it was kind of insubstantial fluff, really. There was a little bit of cavalry weirdness that happened out there that didn't result in a great deal. The cavalry did actually get caught in here by the Temple Inquisitors rather sloppily from Lothlorien's perspective, I must say. But ever since then it's just been a case of really playing tag with one another, not really doing a great deal. But I will rejoin at this point because it does look as though at the very least Cardolan and Rhun over there are going to start skirmishing using their archers, but just based on the amount of frames in this battle alone, this was kind of what I was worried about. I mean, there is a certain point where if the battle is more frames than that limit, around the 50,000 mark to be honest with you, outside of something like Minas Tirith because of the map, it does set alarm bells ringing in my mind that perhaps it's a match where neither side is willing to take the front foot. The onus is much more on the attackers here, of course it is. But again, it's one of those siege battles where things are starting slowly. I do hope that things do change up, but you can tell just from the movement of certain things, like Rhun over here. You know, they're not really making any moves to cross the river. No, the defenders are not going anywhere, that's the thing, that's the puzzling thing. Like, you're not going to be able to just sort of wait them out until they crumble to dust. Eventually you're going to have to move across, there's no getting around that fact, you will have to attack. And it's one of the things that I really don't understand about how the attackers go about doing certain things. You can see that the cannon is also now firing. It'll be interesting to see what they're going after and whether it will hit or not. And it does actually, and it hits centre mass into the Hiriak there, which is very, very nice. This is the sort of thing which will worry the defenders, of course, and that is one of the reasons why the attackers will try and sit here and try and wear the defenders down. But you can actually see they've pulled their archers back, which again is questionable, I think, here from Dro, as he's allowing these units to get shot right in the front. I mean, to be fair, basic archers at most, Variag mercenaries and Minhiriath. He's got his units into formation, shields pointing in the right direction, but the Spears of Amenduir are not the most heavily armoured unit. In fact, they're outright lightly armoured, more so even than the grey cloak-clad Lothlorien allies they have today. Mirkwood, they have a little bit less armour than Lothlorien, with a little bit more melee defence on top of that. So this is sort of the shape that this fight has taken thus far. I think perhaps they are waiting for the stragglers over here, as MP Beckhami's army, rather puzzlingly to be honest with you, takes the long way around instead of going up through here, because this would have given a different angle. I mean, I know that the archers are up here, but there is no getting around the fact that if you outnumber the defenders in a siege like this, you are going to be getting attacked with archers. You are going to be taking a lot of damage. There is going to be no avoiding that. So it always perplexes me when the attackers seem reluctant to take many losses. Skirmishing like this is all well and good, and to be fair, over on this side of things, I would say it's outright worthwhile, because Mirkwood are not responding to this in any way. You could say that this is absorbing a decent amount of ammunition from the attackers. The last thing you really want to be doing though is giving the attackers good value from their archers. And such is the way of things. I mean, you can see here the Riders of the Goldenwood are coming across. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to make another cut here, to be honest with you, because, yeah, this battle has the potential to be really good when everything is set up, but I have the feeling that, well, maybe the Minhiriath men-at-arms are going to charge in. The Riders of the Goldenwood have certainly done so into this unit of Minhiriath archers, preventing them from firing a little bit. But in come the Hearthguard to ward them off. Very tough are the Riders of the Goldenwood. Now you can see the Variag mercenaries moving forwards as well. Minhiriath archers. They're going to charge in again. Both sides sort of charging in, then thinking again, then moving backwards. Neither side being all that committal in these early stages of the battle, and I do hope that this is just the early phases of sort of testing each other out, seeing how one another reacts, because I really hope that isn't going to be the case for the entirety of this battle. Otherwise this has the potential to be a long slog indeed. Forward come the Orc Maulers. I mean, they have succeeded in if nothing else in baiting Mirkwood forward a little bit, and these are only basic elven spears, so they could come in here to try and overwhelm this formation. Snow Trolls are on their way forward from the Misty Mountains. The Variag mercenaries are here. Yeah, Snow Trolls will be very good in this situation because the spears aren't going to do much damage to them in return, and the Snow Trolls themselves will crash right through the elven defences at this level. Scion Rim are also moving forward, a heavier unit, which once again, Spears of Amenduia will have a lot of trouble breaking down a unit as heavy as this. The Orc Maulers are going to take damage at the hands of the Riders of the Goldenwood, as once again they pull back. Here are the Snow Trolls, once again lumbering things in melee. They look a little bit... The Snow Trolls have always been one of the goofier unit models, to be fair, with their sort of oversized helmets and tiny little shields. But they do have a certain charm to them. The Olag High, on the other hand, ever since the new Troll model, look far more menacing and large. And they're going to charge in here, and this is going to be the end of these Elven units on this front line. It says victory seems certain. That is not going to be the case when the Trolls are added to the equation. The Hiriak are on their way forward as well. So a heavier unit of Mirkwood spears. There's a single Orc Mauler back here, holding back the progress of another small bunch of them. There you can see, I think that's the High Elven Ballista crashing through some of their own buildings. Yeah, the Spears of Amenduia are routed. There's very little surprise about that, and perhaps now the attackers smell blood in the water because they are charging forward. A lot of Mordor's units are coming out of the woodwork. More of Cardolan's units are being committed. The Snow Trolls are being sent in alongside the Olag High, so that's a lot of damage that these Elven units are going to be faced with. And the Hiriak are all well and good, but they're still spears at the end of the day. They're not going to be as useful for taking on Trolls as other units, and that shows in the fact that they immediately rout. So trying to be a little bit stingy there on the front line, I think, Mirkwood, and paying for it. And again, they're just dribbling units in one by one. The absolute worst thing you can do in a siege like this. All you're doing is feeding kills into the enemy. Yes, the Ballista is coming in, but will the Ballista be able to get enough damage done? Will the Archers be able to get enough damage done? It's an interesting question. It could be the case, but I really doubt it. I mean, you're sending in good units as well now that you're throwing under the bus. There are actually Swords of Rivendell in there apparently as well, which is surprising. 39 of them. In come the Blades of the Wood as well, who are immediately shaken as well. It goes to show that the attackers are serious about pushing forward. A big mass of numbers over here, and the defenders are trying to hold them back with a more limited force. Could work, especially if the ballista and these archers get the job done. Now is the time where Rhun should be looking across the bridges, I think, and Mordor. These bridges are kind of awkward, and it could be that the newer players don't know how to navigate them. They can be really annoying to get through. We shall see, because they definitely need to be pressuring from multiple angles here. You can see immediately Keren Amroth Rangers exposed, and MP Beckamy is not a newer player, I know that for a fact, so he is chasing down the Rangers, but he needs to be careful. He could overextend with the Snow Trolls here, and with the Broinen River Wards and the Hiri Outh moving in, these are foes that the Snow Trolls don't want to be engaged with. They want to run backwards. They've already succeeded, I think, in frightening the Rangers, if nothing else, and one of the Snow Trolls actually is back here, swinging that club. Yeah, you can see the Trolls are starting to fall in the face of the Broinen River Wards. Lord of the Fallen doing his thing as the Snow Trolls come back. Give them their credit. The Elves are still holding on, but the large force that they are faced with will ultimately break through. As you can see that Mordor, I do like how aggressive Mordor is being here. He's just forcing his way through the lines, which, if you're going up against a defence like this, where they hope to sort of block you in with more limited amounts of troops, this is the best way to deal with them, because you can immediately start to see them panic if you do this, and that, I think, is going to be the case here. The Watchers of the Goldenwood being engaged, I mean, they will kill the Olar Kai, but a really high-profile unit here being engaged by all sorts of Mordor units. With a small Mordor chosen. What have we got over here? And here we have the archers continuing to fire. There's also the Hearthguard of Amon Sul there. More reinforcements making their way down. Interesting that the Hiri Outh are the target. They're shielded. I'd probably be more inclined to go after the Broinen River Wards. Heavily armoured though Imladris may be. You can see that they're arriving far too late. Again, similar sort of scenario here, where as soon as one unit is basically dead, that's when the reinforcements arrive. That's not the way you really want to be doing things, but it's not the end of the world, because this wave is a little bit more substantial with more Mirkwood units. They really need to be being a little bit more all-encompassing here. They're also charging into a situation where javelins are starting to have their way with the defenders. This could be one of those battles with two very distinct phases, an outer phase and then an inner phase. Snow Trolls continuing to do their thing as the Blades of the Wood also succumb. They're more lightweight after all, which should give the opportunity for some more reinforcements to be sent down here should the need arise. I mean, the Olar Kai are still here. That's because the Watchers of the Goldenwood have indeed been pulled back. With all these reinforcements on hand as well, it was always going to be a problem. I really like this from Mordor. Eventually this is going to peter out, but you can see the panic that's engendering in the Elven players, who clearly wanted to approach this in a certain way and Mordor aren't allowing them to. If some more units could be sent down here, and the Snow Trolls are on the way, some damage could be done. The Blades of the Wood and the Swords of Rivendell are still here. Minas Morgul chosen are routing, so yeah, this is where the assault ultimately peters out, but you can tell that the defenders weren't really expecting such an aggressive push. It's just a shame that there wasn't really enough reinforcements directly on hand to follow through on that. You have to sort of preempt that. It's not the easiest thing to predict, but still. Snow Trolls are over here. Again, they're going to be killing off some more of these Blades of the Wood, so more of Lothlorien's more basic troops are falling by the wayside. It's obviously a very familiar unit model from when I've been playing over in Lothlorien. The more standard unit in Divide and Conquer looks, I think, identical to this actually. I think it is the same unit model. The grey cloaks of Lothlorien. In come the Orc Archers. So again, I like this from the attackers. It's not perfect. I think they should be utilising these bridges and maybe going along this way as well, continuing their aggressive tendencies, but it's a damn sight better than just sending in individual units and being slow. I did fear the worst when I saw the amount of frames in this battle replay, but so far at least that hasn't been the case. You can see on the front line now, still a lot of the golden-clad Easterlings. The Black Numenorians have joined them on the front line as well, with their Cardolan underlings in tow, Minhiriath units. I mean, in terms of sheer quality, yes, the Elves are going to be superior, but once again, they're just not sending forward enough here. If they want to hold this position, they need to be more... They need to be bolder. They need to send forward more. I mean, there's Dunedain captains moving forward as well. As soon as they join the front line, the most high-quality unit doesn't even belong to them either. The Dunedain captains will be superior to the units that they will be facing. So again, it's a bit of a bizarre play by the Elves. They're simultaneously not being aggressive enough, but also being too aggressive. They're in that dreaded in-between area where they've simultaneously sent forward too much that it's going to put a dent in their chance of winning the battle, but they've not sent forward enough to actually hold on to the position. Seems to be a very common theme in quite a few siege battles that we have seen. That ballista has the potential to be really damaging, but it's not really focusing on the right things, I don't think. I mean, what is back here that could really be... I mean, yeah, the crossbows, they've taken a little bit of damage, but the ballista's going to run its ammunition supply dry long before the crossbows are all dead. So that's a little bit unfortunate. You can see over here, obviously, in a pure skirmish fight, the Orc archers are not going to be a match for the Lothlorien forces that are over on that hill over there. I think there's some Imladris archers over there as well. Nope, it is just Lothlorien. Variag mercenaries here as well, but like I said, it's all a numbers game. And so far, I think the attackers have started off reasonably well. Still some blades of the wood. You can see that this is a rather disjointed defence. It's not really ready for another push to come forward, is it? Another infantry force came in. They've got infantry who's just sort of scattered all across this hillside. It's very, very odd, I have to say. Meanwhile, Dro's army is here out, continuing to hold the line. Resolutely, to be fair, and this is what Elven quality will get you. You can see actually shooting into the side, and this is actually a very worthwhile target to go after, I must say, for the Variag mercenaries. They can shoot along the side. This front line is already shaken. Reinforcements are going to be necessary to keep it going. Beltroth tribesmen, a volley from them would be really, really nasty, but they might already be out of ammo. They've got their melee weapons out, and the fact they're being pushed in would suggest so. But there are reinforcements on the way. A unit of Swords of Rivendell, armour upgraded, some of them immediately taking some damage from some of the skirmishers that are supporting this assault. Inheriath archers, still over here. Blades of the Wood are moving forward, going on to the aggressive front. Orc archers, however, will immediately start to falter in the face of them. Marchwards of the Wood also firing in. Variag mercenaries will need to turn around to meet the Blades of the Wood, and they are already numerically inferior, and as far as an infantry unit goes, Variag mercenaries are not the worst by any means, but they're no match for the Blades of the Wood. So Lothlorien will be able to go some way to eating into the attacking manpower as the attackers continue to push through this one choke point. That is where I would say the attackers are falling down. It seems like both sides are intent on making this one choke point the centre of attention, when they should be moving over here. I think the defenders have already shown a bit of weakness, to be fair, in how they've set up their defence over here. Yes, you'll be shot on the approach, but you'll be shot on the approach to any choke point that the defenders occupy. But that's not what's going to be happening, is it? I get the feeling that all of the attackers today are going to be piling into one choke point, which I think that in terms of individual unit use, they have been better, but in terms of the macro picture, that is a surefire way to basically lose the game if you're the attackers, especially when you're dealing with Elven quality. If you make the battlefield really narrow, you're just asking for the elves to really establish themselves and their qualities. Hiri out, there's some Woodland Realm axemen heading towards the front line, some Hiri Peng are out of ammunition. Imladris sentries are in the background, there's some Loran archers firing in. Still skirmishing. I mean, a lot of this ammunition isn't being used all that effectively. Again, this very small unit of Blades of the Wood is pushing in from the side, going after all of these attacking skirmishers, which, you know, will be a bit of a pain for the attackers. They will want to utilise their archers and other such skirmishers like crossbows as well as they can. This isn't, as far as a slanted surface goes, this isn't slanted enough to the point where the crossbows can get a clear shot off, which is good for the defenders, of course, because if they could, this defence probably would have fallen already. But as it is, they should be fine. Loran archers continuing to do their thing, as well as the Woodland Realm Patrol. So Mirkwood doing the lion's share of the work on the main battlefront so far, and indeed the only battlefront, I would say. And this is going to be, at least for the time being, where the battle is done. Oh yeah, those Blades of the Wood immediately rout as soon as Rhun come forward with a lot more men. This was a conscious decision by the attackers as well, because MP Beckamy came around all this way specifically to go through this choke point as well, and considering there are some forces on the attack, there are some names that I do recognise. Y2K is one, MP Beckamy is another. I think that's pretty much it. I think the other players that are on the attack, to be fair, are slightly on the newer side. I've seen Farkin before, but regardless, the point still stands. This was a conscious decision by the attackers, and it's a highly questionable one. They are continuing to push forward now. In come the Ballista Bolts, as the Scion Rim move their way forward. Blades of the Wood also push in to melee. Snaga skirmishers. Some Tharbads. Tharbad Warhammers will be good on the front line against some of Imladris' more tanky units, and that could very well be the case soon as the Eldraenway Spearmen show themselves, getting onto the front line. The Dunedain captains could be a good match for them. You can see there in the background as well some Goblin infantry pushing its way forwards, which is most certainly not the last word in terms of quality. But we shall see. I mean, I think, you know, the attackers, one thing they definitely have on their side is they can keep this going for a long time. But I'm not sure if they can keep it going for long enough if they continue to just go through the one choke point. This may not be the most inviting of positions. I mean, there is a reason why the defenders have fallen back to these two choke points. It's unfortunate, to be honest with you. I was hoping in this battle that we would have seen the width of the city actually utilised, but unfortunately we're seeing exactly the same sort of thing from MIRLOND that we saw in the last two times, I believe, that I've shown this map. The defenders have just fallen back to these two choke points and held it for the majority of the match, which again is unfortunate. I think it does show a bit of a lack of imagination, a little bit of a lack of fun. I can understand wanting to pad your kill counts when you're on the defence as the elves, but you're going to get tons of kills anyway. There's no need to make the battle so one-dimensional, but no matter. What I am actually hoping for is that the attackers manage to punch through here, and then we might actually see the real guts of the settlement get used back here, which we actually haven't seen before. We haven't seen stuff like this be utilised, or we haven't seen a fallback to the very top of this hill before. But we shall see. There's still a long way to go in this fight. As the ballista continues to fire in, I think as well those are clear white projectiles, are they not? Could have been ballista bolts. You can see the lower quality units already starting to waver, and with Imladris holding the front line between the pikes and the heavy spears, that is an extremely difficult combination to deal with. Again, I think you can see a little bit of inexperience here, because a lot of these units are sort of individually fighting foes rather than sort of adopting a combined arms approach where the spears and pikes are mixed in with one another. You can see the pikes are on the left, the spears are on the right. Again, that's a sign, again, of newer players, I would suggest. What have we got here? Scion Rim. Y2K is finally taking it upon himself to go this way, which it's about time, I would say, that one of the more experienced hands in the game takes charge and goes over this way. But you can see that the Flagrim are immediately getting shot. Poison arrows and silver thorns coming their way. In come the snow trolls, who are going to do their best to break up the Watch to the Golden Wood. And it's unfortunate the silver thorns can knock over trolls. They elected not to, though, and the trolls are going to get into the March Wardens of the Wood. It's going to be good. That'll disrupt that formation. It will allow Rhun to push forward. Cardolan are also coming in, as well as Mordor. Good to see a bit more of a joint assault now, as the Elven archers are forced onto the back foot. Down come the Eldraenway Swordmasters, Woodland Protectors. That was a blank shot, actually. They cancelled their shot just before it actually went off. Eldraenway Swordmasters will rip through trolls, of course, especially if they're backed up by the Watch of the Golden Wood. But there are a lot of runic units coming in here as well. The Adonai Lancers, or Ardenian Lancers, coming in. I mean, that is the best way to deal with Eldraenway Swordmasters. The fact they've only got a single hit point means if you do get a nice, clean charge on them, it's a real problem. I mean, you don't really want to just sort of mulch your way into melee with them like this. You definitely want to sort of cycle charge, but again, I assume a newer player. Temple Inquisitors are also moving in. They'll be a little bit better in sustained combat, to be fair, but there's very little in sustained combat that's going to be enough to deal with Eldraenway Swordmasters. Once again, defenders trying to get away with a small amount of units on the front line, and now that the attackers are starting to spread their wings a little bit, that sort of thing won't fly for too much longer. Over on this front line, meanwhile, you can see once again, it's been tough. That's the thing that I will say for the attackers. While they have been a little bit too eager to just funnel into one choke point, they have at least been willing to commit a serious amount of firepower to the front line, and the defenders as a result have taken losses. Imladris sentries, only 16 of them remain. This attack is going to break up, but another one will follow shortly behind it. Temple Executioner is going to lead the way this time. They need more than just one unit of Temple Executioners though. The rest of the attack is lagging behind. That is a bit of a shame, but that was a fortunate shot there from the Dragon's Breath, threading the needle certainly. Managing to hit mostly Woodland Realm Patrol to be fair, but a few Imladris Guardians I think also fell as a result of that. Elder Runway Swordmasters actually being circumvented, the Woodland Protectors getting engaged by some of the Flag Rim. There is also the small matter of the Temple Guard. Yeah, that from Mordor. I was wondering where they went because I just noticed they were going up here. This was doomed to failure. There's a difference between being aggressive and being foolish, and charging your General's Bodyguard unit into the front of the best prepared front line on the map, I would say, considering it is combined arms, was never going to go well. And ultimately Mordor's General does fall, which will negatively impact the leadership of the rest of his army. Woodland Protectors, meanwhile, are getting shot up by the Ardenaim Shadow Bows. Some Nagiriath Archers are in here as well. Elder Runway Swordmasters' victory still seems certain despite being massively outnumbered. It goes to show their quality. Having said that, I do think the numbers of the Easterlings here will ultimately be enough to override the Elven defence. Nagiriath Archers coming in here as well, only going to add to how outnumbered that they truly are. Once again, I think we're going up to ×2 speed. Again, the cavalry is just sort of mulching into the front line. There are no pikes present here, so at the very least they won't be torn to pieces quite so quickly. There are Uruk Captains here, there are Numenorian Shield Guard, there are Temple Executioners. You can see there Snaga Skirmishers from MP Bekame. He continues to try and charge in, but he's just hitting the back of his own men, so he's not doing any damage. Forward come Numenor though. This is what I like to see from the attackers. They're seeing the defenders. Not a lot of manpower on the front line. Now they're getting in behind the lines. Woodland Protectors are throwing javelins in, which is going to cause a lot of damage as long as they go. It will cause a lot of damage regardless, but to be efficient they should be going after higher profile targets. Imladris Guardians making their way in, managing to prevent the forward momentum of the Temple Inquisitors. There are the Hiri Lang as well. Heavy swordsmen. This is going to be where the Temple Inquisitors die. Mordor definitely going to be the first army to fall here, but at the very least he's being aggressive. He's sort of setting the tone. Numenorian Shield Guard routing, so now the attacker's actually starting to fall into the trap of not committing enough to the front line. It's definitely something that both sides have engaged in within this battle. There is a lot of blood spray coming up from that. Watchers of the Golden Wood utilising their Silver Thorns, and this is where the blood spray is coming from, the Kindred of Celeborn. Rangers may not be such a crashing hazard anymore because of the removal of the blood spray, but the Kindred of Celeborn can still provide such things for us. Carmel's Chosen moving their way forwards as well. Another serious unit. These Woodland Protectors are almost certainly going to get overwhelmed. The arrival of the Lorenan Swordmasters backing up what very little remains of the Elder Runway. Only a few individual unit models now, but Lorenan Swordmasters maybe not quite the same as the Elder Runway Swordmasters, but they're still a very strong unit indeed. Halberds on their way forward though. That will be enough to cause problems for these Elven swordsmen because of the phalanx. There are the Watchers of the Golden Wood. Reinforcements ready if needs be. The Gwythi Arthand are here. Here are the March Wardens of the Wood as well. Don't know if they're going to shoot point blank or what. Interesting to see what they want to accomplish. Temple Guard are over there. What have we got over here? Imladris Guardians pushing in to the fight. And we can see Keren Amroth Rangers are up there. Elders of the Elven King using their Silver Thorns. More goblins being pushed onto the front line. Javelins being used. Like most sieges, when it comes down to sort of extreme quality versus quantity, it's just going to be a matter of if the defenders have enough to hold on. Like I was saying in the Gondolin Silmarillion match a couple weeks back, our main hope there was because of our huge numbers advantage, we really wanted to just sort of break them. Just take away as much of their manpower as possible, and as soon as that reaches a critical level, they will be done. If the attackers can do that here, it should be just fine. have supporting units, crossbows. Temple Guard are firing in armor-piercing arrows. Interesting to see what they're firing at, actually, because that is a very important asset that they have at their disposal. Looks like they just ran out of ammunition, but from where they were pointing, they were shooting up here. But the elves at this point are pushing back. Snaga skirmishers getting engaged by Lothlorien archers. Javelins coming in. Woodland protectors shuffling off into the distance. Elder archers continuing to fire. Defeat seems certain. Defeat is almost a certainty for the elves. Again, it's a numbers question at this point.
The defeat seems almost certain.
Eldar archers. Lothlorien archers as well. They're over here. So there's a lot of firepower still from the elves, and that is their main hope, of course. The fact that they can deal consistent damage throughout. Temple Guard heading to the front line, that'll be a welcome spike in quality. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers there. I did hear the cranking of crossbows, but it's from the Misty Mountains variant. And again, I'm not sure what they're firing at, but whatever they have a good shot on. Could be good against the Elder archers because of how good they are in melee as well. Still a bit of a messy assault uphill. Rhun are definitely not going to have enough to deal with this all on their lonesome. Going to have enough to finish off the Watchers of the Goldenwood here though. Carmel's chosen, and all of the Gamprim they have with them will be enough to finish them off ultimately, but more and more reinforcements are having to be sent over to the other portion of the map. Lothlorien spears. Ballista is over here as well. Let's see. Lothlorien archers and Elder archers continuing to fire as well. I mean, they're doing consistent damage here, but who breaks first? One of the things the elves really have in their favour is the fact that once their archers are out of ammunition, yes, they lose a bit of damage, but all their archers are capable of melee as well for the most part, so they're less likely to run out of steam than other factions. Here Elang adding themselves to the front line, but once again I just don't know if the elves have got enough on this front line to hold for a long period of time. That there is the Elders of the Elven King with their silver thorns. They don't have the same sparkly effect as the Watchers of the Golden Wood. It has the same effect. They and the God Hellion have to make do with this projectile that looks like a ranger's arrow, to be honest with you. It's kind of strange. But it's all going to come down to archers here. These Wardens of Amonlank have got their axes out. Kindred of Caliborn still biding their time and waiting. What have we got going on over here? March Wardens of the Wood, are they going to try and get into position to fire? As the Watchers of the Golden Wood continue to hold back the runic units that are still over here. To be honest with you though, that's not that much. March Wardens of the Wood aren't even that big of a concern, to be honest with you. I think the God Hellion are shooting into them. But yeah, I mean, Rhun have taken this portion of the hill, but they can't push up here because they still have the Lothlorien pikes and heavy spears blocking the way, reinforcements, a few units of range support, so if Y2K wants to continue this assault, he will either need more of his own men, which I don't think he has a great deal more of, or he needs one of his allies to pick up the slack. Misty Mountains are still back here, Numenor is still here. There's a large proportion of troops over here. This, I think, when this gets committed, it's really all or nothing time. Once again, though, this one choke point over here proving to be the primary killing ground. Elder archers, Lothlorien archers, and Keren Amroth rangers. Elders of the Elven King still have ammunition, apparently. Player has admitted defeat, possibly Mordor, I would say. Half of Mirkwood remains. Wardens of Amonlank pushing in, heavy axemen, that AP will be very useful. The quality of all these damage dealers on the front line for the elves is going to make it a very punishing experience for the attackers, but they just need to push forward at this point, I think. It's been that kind of game. Announcer still fancies the chances of the attackers, which goes to show the numbers discrepancy. March Wardens of the Wood are here. I mean, they could get caught out by the Carmel's Chosen here. But you know, every little victory for the attackers. makes life more difficult for the defenders. They may not be the most high quality unit, but you never know. 50 odd elves by the end could be the difference between victory and defeat. And then this careless loss of the March Wardens could prove to be significant. Numenorean steel bows on their way over here could be ideal for breaking up a unit of pikes like this, if that's what Valkyrion has in mind. Still, this one choke point continues. Victory seems certain for the defenders at this point because they have far more on the front line. They've committed a lot more. An individual unit of heavy goblin halberds is going to accomplish very little from MP Backme. Like I said, if you're going to commit something, you need to commit something large, not just individual units, because that's not going to do anything. Blackbacks are moving forward. This, I think, all needs to be moved in at this point. Most of the ammunition supply will have run dry. There will still be ammunition flying around, of course, and there is still the small matter of the Kindred of Celeborn firing over here, which these split shots, maybe wait until the split shots are out. That, however, is a very nice shot from the Dragon's Breath, right into the centre mass, taking up a very good position on this hill. Like I said, if the elves had actually deployed a bit further forward, contested these areas, it wouldn't have been quite so easy for the runic cannon to get into position, but as it is, that is something they have to deal with because of how defensive they went. Karen Amroth Rangers firing away. In terms of damage dealing potential, the most deadly unit on the field today, because Mirkwood did not bring their Greenwood Rangers, I don't think. I think, honestly, going forward, that is a good house rule to have. Only allow one unit of Rangers to be on the defence, because the amount of kills they can get when bulked up is quite ridiculous. And it has resulted in a bit of a warped matter over time. Lothlorien Spearmen did try to push forward, presumably going after the Numenorian steel bows, and ultimately hasn't really ended up working out, as they get killed to the last man. A couple of units of steel bows over here, so they have an opportunity here, do Numenor, unless they're out of ammunition, in which case the only thing they have an opportunity to do is perish in spectacular fashion. They still have ammo? Looks like they're just hanging out, so I assume they don't have ammo. The Lothlorien Spears did manage to get out of there. There goes the Misty Mountains General after the Blackbacks were committed, but they looked like they were being committed forward on their own, which is never a good sign. Units being committed from over here now, more Dunedain captains. There's a large slew of Cardolan units coming forward, but none of them especially impressive. The Blackbacks are doing damage on the front line though, so it goes to show what a difference a little bit of quality can make. Forward come the Wardens of Tyr and Gorthad, who, you know, unless there's ammunition to deal with them, that phalanx will be extremely awkward for the defenders to try and handle. What have we got going on back here? Some God Helenes and Karos Galadon's Guardians. Interesting to see that they do have some units back here, so maybe we will see the final stand. Elders of the Elven King here as well. Sentinels, Karen Amroth Rangers, I should say. Sentinels of Karen Amroth are the sword and board unit from Divide and Conquer. Still got it on the brain. Kindred of Celeborn are over here. Seafarers of Nindamos, this is a little bit more like it from Numenor. Going after the wrong unit in my opinion, but I guess they don't have much of a choice because they are the ones that are in front. Hitting square into the front of the Lothlorien Spears. They really want to be going after the Karos Galadon's Guardians, because if you leave it to the late game and you've got nothing to sort of disperse a front line like this and you have to go through from the front, you're doomed because of their multiple HP. They don't have the AP attacks that the 1st Legion Pikes have, but they are nigh impossible to break down. Unless you can push through, which in the late game is unlikely, because that's when your armies will be on their last legs. Still a few Lothlorien archers here. You can also see the laser light projectiles. This is one of those maps as well which does tend to be a little bit brighter than normal, so the split shots don't stand out in quite the same way as they do. This is another important unit to have in the late game as well, the Kindred, because of how good they are up close and personal. Seafarers are moving forwards, as are the Numenorian, well I say that, Numenorian steel bows are just kind of hanging out here. Carmel's chosen, and the Dragon's Breath crew over here. Chance to show their skills in melee, but perhaps not for long. That was a good shot by the Javelins. Targeting the right thing down now, but Karos Galadon's Guardians are going to try and get into melee here, get as close as possible to the action so the Javelins don't have a clear shot. But now's a good opportunity. They can try and envelop the pikes, and that is one way in which you can deal with them quite nicely. Don't know if they have the expertise over here, maybe. Numenor definitely doing the right thing here though. Valkyrion going about his business in the right way. Getting in and around the Karos Galadon's Guardians. Their multiple HP will still mean they don't fall apart in the way that a normal pike probably would in this situation, but he's in and amongst them. The Phalanx formation is there. The Lothlorien player trying to salvage them now by attacking the steel bows with his March Wardens. It is interesting. More reinforcements are here, more steel bows. Seafarers doing the same thing. So I like that from Numenor. A good little bit of play. Meanwhile, over here, yeah, this is what I always feared this battle would be. That's why I'm sure a lot of you will have been wondering why I've had this battle on ×2 speed for most of this. And that's because this has been the battle, pretty much. This one hill here has been the entirety of the battle, really. And there's only so much you can say about that. And so ×2 speed is really the only option to prevent me from going absolutely crazy. And at least this way we can see the battle change and morph, and there's more to comment on at a faster rate. Elders of the Elven King firing in down there, still with a bit of ammo, still capable of dishing out a bit of damage. There are some Lorenan Swordmasters. Kindred of Caliborn out of ammo at this point. You can see they pulled out their dual swords. What else have we got going on? Seafarers. The pikes still doing a good job, to be fair. They've taken some damage, but ultimately the reinforcements have been enough. The Elven King's Palace Guard rounding the corner as well is pretty much the final nail in the coffin, really. This is the sign that the defenders will be victorious over here without more reinforcements. A single unit of seafarers in melee is not going to be enough to turn this battle around, unfortunately for them. And there's no reinforcements nearby, I don't think. Nope, the seafarers are going to go into melee. But like I said, not going to be enough, unfortunately, for them. Now then, there's a few units making their way over. Crossbows might not be the worst thing, to be fair. Numenorian cohort, perhaps. At this point, I think the attackers are in really big danger, actually, of this all falling apart on them. It seems like they've been a little bit indecisive on what choke points to truly attack. Valkyrion as well, it's, again, rather unsurprisingly, he's got all of his elite units back here. At this point, I don't know what he's saving them for, to be honest with you, because you need them on the front line, you need that quality. And ultimately, most of the Numenor high tier units as well are not going to be all that bothered. Even higher tier archers will struggle to kill them really efficiently. And you need your strength on the front line at this point. It's all just going to be a matter of brute strength for the attackers. Do they have what it takes to just knock the defenders over? Still a long way to go in this battle, to be fair. I'm sure you can hear in my voice as well that... Oh, there goes the runic general. Rather embarrassingly at the hands of probably Lothlorien's weakest melee combatants. But I'm sure you can hear from the tone of my voice, this isn't my favourite kind of battle at all. It's quite one-dimensional as a battle goes, you know, like just a choke point battle. Like, it comes to a point when you've seen one, you've seen them all. And this is the kind of battle, honestly, which was contributing to my burnout from before. Because a lot of battles that I was getting were similar to this. Or at least similar enough to this that, you know, you get to the point where you've seen it time and time again. And this has been the case. Like, there's only so much that I can say about two choke point fights happening simultaneously. And it's a real shame, because this settlement has got so much more to give than that, I think. But it seems like every time we see MIRLOND, this is the only way in which people want to play it. It's part of the reason why I've sort of, every time I play now, I'm overly reckless. It ultimately ends up making me probably one of the worst players on the pitch, but at least it makes battles work out in ways that are slightly different. This is far too comfortable for both sides. It's like both sides are just going through the motions, really. And ultimately, the Elven defenders here are going to have an extraordinary kill count, there's no doubt about that, but it's not as if you have to work that hard. Like, if you don't get an extraordinary kill count on a map like this, in the way that they've decided to play it as the elves, then you've done something horribly, horribly wrong. This is the sort of, this is basics. Tharbad Warhammers are on the front line now. That armor piercing will be useful, but they're going up against the superior Warhammers in the Gwaithir Myrdain, or the Zebras, as Dustin so lovingly refers to them as. they are stronger than the Tharbads. Having said that, they're already a little bit damaged. They've been on the front line longer. Ballista crew are in here. The elves are running low on manpower to actually send forward. Are they going to fall back? I believe they actually are. They are going to fall back. So I mean, this is something. They're going to pull back over to here. They are all going to sort of congregate in this little room over here. Lorenan Swordmasters, Imladris Sentries, Godhead Eve, Gwaith and yeah, the attackers. They don't stand a chance at breaking through this. This is pretty much all of Imladris' tankiest units combined with Lothlorien's multiple HP pikes. Mirkwood probably won't have anything left to contribute to that fight when it's all said and done, but I highly doubt the attackers are going to have enough left to break their way through that. And in the interim, they still have to try and make their way through the front lines, which includes Elven King's Palace Guard and Kindred of Celeborn. They're getting shot at point blank by the Minhiriath sharpshooters. That's a nice bit of positioning there from Farkin. But if they can get some infantry into them, you can see the Kindred of Celeborn are going to charge forward by the looks of things. Ooh, they just fail to get another volley off. That's unfortunate for them. The Kindred will of course easily defeat the sharpshooters, AP or no. The level of quality is just too disparate. Elven King's Palace Guard almost get in before another volley comes their way, as those twin-ended glaives do their grisly work. There are still a few pikes, only 7 of them mind you, but this is a lot of higher quality manpower that could have been quite useful for taking on the front, well I say the front line, the last stand really, where they intend to sort of wall themselves up. The elves ultimately will fall away, the Gwaith Myrdain will take their pound of flesh while they do, the ballista crew will not of course, they're just here to get in the way. But, what have we got going on back over here? Still got the Numenor elites, but that's pretty much the only thing in reserve at this point, other than the Minotaur Roman gatekeepers, who do have the armour upgrade, so they're very tanky. They've got a good angle, although they do need to be a little bit careful of friendly fire at this point. Cardolan with their elites fighting on the front, and Minhiriath sharpshooters are over here. Still a few elite elves getting in the way. Palace Guard. Very depleted at this point though, with another unit of Numenorean cohort, and of course with some Narinaru Sentinels. They could try and retreat at this point. There goes Haldir. Dying off, as he often does. I think he is going to try and get his Palace Guard back to the final stand actually, just so that he can be a part of that as well. Or is he? Is he going to stick around and get a few more kills on the Numenorean cohort? Kindred of Celeborn is still fighting hard. I mean, ultimately the elves are falling away on this front line now. Some ammunition from the Minotaur Roman gatekeepers and heavy goblin crossbows will be enough to kill off the Kindred of Celeborn pretty quickly. No, Mirkwood are just going to stick around here and fight. Get as many kills as they can out here in the city itself. That's going to be the end of the Kindred. As soon as I say that, Mirkwood do start to pull back. There are still some March Wardens of the Wood over there. And I believe, yeah, they have one over here. There are still some March Wardens of the Wood up there trying to do some damage, and they will succeed, but I mean a lot of these units are fairly tanky, so they're not going to rip them to pieces super quickly by any means. Pharazim Swordmaster 3 hit points as well, so the March Wardens plenty damaging, but not damaging enough in this situation. These March Wardens are still just hanging out over here. I wonder if Numenor will deal with them before moving on. Yes, they will. Or will they? The elves are faster after all, so they will be able to get away. I say that. Numenor timed that well. So the March Wardens will be defeated. And yeah. Numenor moving forwards. At this point actually we can go up to times 6 speed and just contemplate. To be fair, most of this battle has been very by the books, almost painfully so far, but this last portion, it's still most certainly going to be the sort of thing where I times 2 through it, because it's very one-dimensional as far as the fight goes, but this is the first time we've seen this back here utilised on this map, so that's something to be grateful for. A few poison arrows being used, again heavily armoured and shielded from the front though, so at least they're getting a few shots off, but it's ultimately not going to be enough to kill anything really. He's doing the right thing technically, targeting down pikeman, but these are really the exception to the rule. The tanky pikes with shields. You can continue to go backwards, get again a point blank shot, but once again it's into the front of heavy plate-clad Numenorians, and now Lothlorien retreat back inside their villa. So, place your bets. This is going to be interesting. We're actually going to time 6 through this, to be honest with you, because this is what it is. There's not really much that I can comment on. There's 2 units of Elven Pikes, very high quality. There's Gwaith the Arthand in there. There is Swordmasters, slightly depleted. There's Godhelm, another really strong unit, of course. There's a few superfluous units. That's interesting. What are they doing? Lorien Swordmasters killing off the Numenorian cohorts. In come the Tharbad Warhammers. I would think the defenders would probably win this if the attackers have to attack into them. Just those 2 units of Elven Pikes in particular are just going to be outrageously difficult to wear down. Those Lorien Swordmasters are doing okay, I suppose, but nothing overly special. As MP Beckermeat threatens to commit 6 Blackback Berserkers as well, so you can see that people are really running on fumes at this point. Numenor definitely the key to the attacker's victory, if such a thing is even possible at this stage. They've got some quality units left, but in terms of numbers at this point it's actually relatively even. But in terms of quality, as you might expect, the elves are far superior. Cardolan's crossbows could be the difference here. The Gwaith the Arthand are here. I think something like this will probably end up being the thumbnail. Albeit I don't have the confidence to do that during a replay. We shall see later when I go about getting the thumbnail again. Still a couple of Cave Troll Drummers. They're not really going to be enough in melee to do much of anything there. There's nothing really in terms of ranges at this point, so here we go. The Gwaith the Arthand, again one of those just units which seems indestructible when you face off against them, and so it's proving to be here. They are tanking the damage that's coming their way. And at this point both sides may as well just slam into one another and see what happens. Definitely been one of those fights though. This fight probably took a long time to play as well, which, having seen all of the battles that I have, it's a little bit difficult to get enthusiasm again about battles such as this, to be honest with you. Forward comes some Elven Pikes, taking a bit of damage from the Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers, but pike to pike here, you back the Imladris sentries from a sheer damage perspective. And even if you would say otherwise, there's another unit of Elven Pikes back here anyway. Elders of the Elven King are still back here also, 50 of them. Very, very solid. The Godhelm. Still, there are some heavy hitters. The Pharazim Swordmasters in particular could prove to be a bit of a problem. The elves do retreat back inside their shell. Marchwarns of the Wood taking damage from heavy goblin crossbows. It's a bizarre situation, this, really. Once again, another choke point. We'll see if the defenders manage to choke this one away. They shouldn't, based on the quality of units they have left. They need to get more than one unit out here though. Like I said before, this was a mistake they made earlier on in the battle as well, and forward come the Royal Legion. I mean, they're trying to push their way through. It will ultimately end in failure, I think, but at least the attackers were trying to do something there. Pharazim are in there. They have buckled the pike formation a little bit, but it's not going to be enough really. But it's good to see them try it. In come the Minotaur Roman Guardians as well, for the final slog. Yeah, definitely one of those kinds of battles. We've all been a part of them, we've all seen them at this point as well. Not a bad battle by any means, but quite one-dimensional. And ultimately, very by the book. I think the attackers did the defenders a bit of a favour by making the battlefield small, but to be fair, the defenders did wall up really hard on 2 choke points in particular. And against 3 elven factions with the kind of money they had available to them here, it was always going to be fairly tricky, I think. A lot of the generals are starting to fall there. Some floating pillars showing that the asset doesn't quite fit on the ground that they have provided for it. There goes our Pharazon, killed off by one of the God Helene. And that is just a sign that the battle is coming to an end. And it is close, to be fair. It is within a very, very small percentage. Like I said, for this one I would look beyond the percentage a little bit. It's very difficult to commentate enthusiastically on a fight which is one very long slog. Some people like playing in those kinds of games. I would argue more so that it's the players that have set up the lobby and who are on the defence that like playing in that kind of game. But still, it is certainly what it is. Lothlorien getting the most kills, which is unsurprising considering they had rangers. They had the best, well, they had the lion's share of the skirmish action there, with Mirkwood coming in just behind them and Imladris, pure melee, getting the least amount of kills, but again, nothing too surprising about that. And you can see all of the attackers doing relatively similarly. Mordor getting the least. Again, Mordor was very aggressive. Some of the things he did were quite good, but other things were far too reckless. Other than that, it was a battle that it does what it says on the tin, for lack of a better phrase. But let's see what did the damage for Dro's Mirkwood army. So yeah, Elves of the Elven King doing well, Wardens doing well. Maybe not quite as well as I would have thought, actually, considering their range prowess and then their abilities in melee. Usually I'd expect to see them up around 200 in a siege like this. But the Hiri Pang did very well. The Woodland Round Patrol actually did quite well. Basic archers, of course. And the rest of his army actually relatively average, although I would say that early on we were obviously seeing Mirkwood commit a lot of their sort of mainline units into fights that they were sort of slowly losing, and they never committed them in enough numbers, to be fair. So it's rather unsurprising that in the end it was his archers that ended up doing most of the damage for him. But yeah, like I said, this battle was what it was. Thank you to Dro for sending this one to me. I know that he sent me a few in the past which I've completely missed, so I'm glad that I was finally able to get around to one at the very least. And a big thank you to all of the players that joined him in this endeavour. I can at least see a couple of familiar names, but I can also see a couple of familiar clan tags in there as well. So yeah, like I said, as of now, the two replays I've got on my backlog that I intend to get to quickly are a 3v3 sent to me by Sin, which is likely to be the polar opposite of this, to be honest with you. Probably it's going to be a pitch battle which is significantly shorter, but probably the play involved is probably going to be of higher quality. But also, not that the play in this battle was low quality, it's just that there was a very limited amount that you could do in a battle like this. It just was what it was, but I've got to stop saying that, I've got to stop repeating myself. But yeah, Sin's 3v3, I'll be getting to that soon, and there is also a siege on Toll for Last. So those are the two that I'm going to be recording next, albeit I'm still recording these a fair ways in advance. Like I said, I don't know if I'll have a Patreon up at this point. I may very well do. We'll have to see. It's one of those things I'm still puzzling through myself. I'll discuss it with people on stream if they think it's a good idea or not, and that will decide a certain amount of things. The streaming will keep going, of course. Again, 2 videos a week, 2 streams a week. That's still likely to be what I'm working on, even though by the time of this video I think I will be back at university, so it is worth bearing that in mind as well. But yeah, definitely interesting. Not really sure what else I can add. There was something I was going to say actually, but I think that sort of thing can wait till elsewhere. Like the end of battle replays are not really the best areas to give sort of mini channel updates in. But regardless, another large-scale siege that we saw here. And yeah, it's decent to see MIRLOND again. It was nice to see a new part of the map used. With maps like this is one of those maps where I see there's a lot of detail, but very rarely do we get to see it because it often works out in the same way. But the next big siege we should be seeing should be Toll for Last, which that is a battle which by this point we've seen most of the ways in which it can work out, but there are always intricacies on Toll for Last that don't exist on a map like this. It's kind of interesting to see how the construction of these maps actually does impact the overall result. But yeah, regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.